Welcome to Watch You Want, and thanks for logging on. Well, I'm back here this Friday with Josh, and it is This Week in Watches. Josh, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing great, and actually, before we get into the broadcast, I want to shamelessly self-promote. You can also follow us on Instagram, and I'd love you to click on the link in the description below. Those of you watching live, hold that thought. Those of you watching the broadcast, click away. So you can follow me, Federico, and Josh here as we work our way through the entire mass of watches. New, pre-owned, we don't see too many new, but we see some come in off warranty.
Yeah.
Pre-owned, true vintage. We have a fantastic Instagram account, and now that Fed is running it, I really want you to go support him because Federico is talking watches 24 hours a day live on our Instagram comment threads.
I thought it's Federico wants watches now.
Federico always wants watches. So guys, welcome, and I want to just say we've got a slate of news and a bunch of bandwidth for your questions tonight, but I want to first reach out to a friend of the show, Cabal A, who actually asked me a question about a watch. He wanted to know if you should buy the 2012 Jaeger LeCoultre Reverso Ultra-Thin Rouge. This was a special edition for boutiques, and maybe 400, maybe 500 of these were made with a glorious red lacquer dial. But he kindly sent in a wrist shot of the watch after he bought it. I'm happy to have steered him in that direction.
Nice.
And Cabal, congratulations. You bought a modern classic, one of the few tribute watches that actually surpasses the original.
Congrats.
All right, so Josh, here's a question. A friend of the show, Mark V, was trying to set me up with a Porsche 911 991 GT3 now that I'm like car single again with a Chevy Volt. My Audi, you remember it, my late great S8 2003, it's not with me anymore. Complicated story, but on the other hand, it's kind of like dating. You get right back on the horse. Now that I've got a reliable car, I'm open to suggestions from you guys for what the crazy vintage / supercar thing could be. So Josh.
Viper.
I'm not saying no. Okay, there was an interesting story about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. Hodinkee announced a Corne de Vache Vacheron Constantin special edition. We've been following the aftermath. Summarize it briefly if you could.
They are becoming somewhat of a retailer for Vacheron. I mean, that's kind of what it is. So it's a new step for online company, especially a media company. You know, there was mixed reviews. I think a lot of the hardcore collectors weren't really too happy about that because it's outside the normal channels, selling online, brand new watches. Obviously, dealers of Vacheron, which like Governor Jewelers is one, they weren't too happy either because it's now you can buy a brand new watch through an online source. It's kind of outside the normal, channel.
Yeah, I think what Josh is getting at is that almost everyone got burned by this. Consider, there was no advance notice, so longtime collectors of Vacheron, and when you're talking Vacheron, it's not like the Zenith Primero for Hodinkee. This is a personal relationship, price range, and brand profile. And a lot of collectors didn't get any heads up to be able to purchase this thing, a special edition in advance.
Yeah.
And with 36 pieces made and kind of a celebrated case profile, this was definitely an enthusiast watch. And then a lot of dealers, I think, thought, you know, what the hell, this is a blog that doesn't have to stock inventory.
Yeah.
And they got to sell 36 watches without having any kind of dealer agreement.
Yeah, that's rough. On our side, that's really rough.
Well, I mean, just in general.
And then what do we see? We see, you know, on a site like Chrono24.
A week later, one shows up on Chrono24 with a 33% markup. The punters are already speculating. I feel like this was a blunder from every direction. Hodinkee, of course, comes out of it, you know, shiny, bright, new. They're really, it's really no smirch on them.
No.
But Vacheron, its collectors, and its dealers are all up in a tiff over this.
Scratching their heads to say the least, right?
Yeah, I think Hodinkee manages to avoid any slime here, but the question becomes ultimately, the manufacturers have some sort of dealer commitments, collector commitments, relationship commitments, and image commitments.
And they just bypassed all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Vacheron's coming off kind of a tough year sales-wise, so I understand the temptation to sell 36 watches at like full boat.
Yeah.
But I don't know if this is a sustainable model.
It is weird. Maybe, you know, maybe it sounded great in a board meeting, but in the execution, it definitely is, it's a little strange.
Yeah, at the very least, you know, when I was in the Navy and we had the Omega, you know, serviceman's purchase program, yeah, we could buy these watches via a special offer. I could have had the X33 for $600 on Kevlar, $800 on the bracelet. I know. But the bottom line was you also had to sign an agreement saying something to the effect of will not sell for 3 years.
Yeah.
I feel like that sort of treatment should apply to this kind of sale.
That would make more sense.
I mean, so at the very least, you don't have the speculators kind of trashing the concept, sliming the brand, and undermining the process.
Yeah, it's rough too. And yeah, like you said, you know, Vacheron came off a rough SIHH, right? With the
well, I mean, last year it was all about the third generation overseas, which did not take off.
No, and I mean, for many reasons, we've talked about it before. So it just seems like another step in mismanagement, which again, you know, brands can come back from these things. They do all the time.
Right.
But this doesn't seem like it was a way to do it.
Yeah, there's a reason that Patek will smack you down if you go around and turn an approval watch or an application watch on Chrono 24. I feel like something along those lines should have been arranged here.
Right.
But moving forward, there's also some good news for those of you who like watches and don't want to necessarily face exclusion. The price is right, but supply is limited. My favorite forum online, PuristPro, celebrating 15 years. They've actually partnered, like Hodinkee did, with Zenith to create a variation on last year's kind of, I would say, limited edition tribute hit, the Chronometro CP-2, a vintage style 1965 to 70 Italian military order called the Chronometro CP-2, originally retailed by A. Corelli. 1,000 were made last year. 50 are going to be made with custom rotor for PuristPro and custom caseback.
Nice.
$8,700 US. I think,
bargain.
yeah, it's a good price. It's a COSC rated watch,
Okay.
so like the original, it's a chronometer. 43 millimeters stainless steel, comes on a nubuck leather strap, so you got that nice oily calf leather.
Yeah.
But also a NATO textile. You get a pin buckle
Can't go
and you
wrong
get a
with a NATO.
deployant. I got to admit, I love PuristPro. It's my favorite place on the internet, and even if I come home dead sick and exhausted, I probably still log on just to check the front page, and especially the JLC forum. I don't know if I'm going to be spending my own money on this just because I'm dead driven to finish the roadmap of my JLC collection.
Sure.
But down the line, I could definitely see myself picking up one of these.
You think that just like how the Speedy Tuesday kind of went crazy and is actually hard to find, a little over retail, you think these ones will go that way, or
I
probably
don't
not?
know, because it's really for people who are super nerds and loyal to a forum. Speedy Tuesday also had the advantage of being a Project Alaska 3 tribute.
Okay.
So even now, I mean, granted, this is also an A. Corelli CP2 tribute, but I feel like Speedmasters and Speedy Tuesday and Project Alaska and Omega Vintage have a bigger following than PuristPro and Zenith.
Understood.
But I like
Agreed.
the watch.
Cool.
But we also know this, now after the 25 pieces for Hodinkee and 50 pieces for PuristPro, can we conclude that LVMH brands, with the exception of maybe Bulgari, are willing to make you a micro edition if you can guarantee 6 figures in revenues at list price?
Yeah, it looks like that, yeah, for sure.
The watch you want live, Zenith Special Edition El Primero.
We're going to have some red in it.
Coming 2017. Okay. So guys, let me give a shout out to our live audience. By the way, guys who are watching, if you want to check out the live chat box, Federico is talking watches throughout the broadcasts. He lives in the chat box. That's where you can interact with him during all of our live events. Okay. Federico, Don Gizzle, Tom P., Andrew, NATO Steve, Brian Duffy, Martin, Galtaforce, Get Out of the John Boy, Chris Rupert, Sam, Sebastian, Justin Ford. Welcome, guys, and thanks for joining us. I know some of you guys are staying up late, getting up early to join us from far-flung locales. We always appreciate that. And for those of you just joining us, remember to follow us on Instagram, where Federico is in constant contact. You can't always watch him live, but you can communicate with him live through our social media. He's also managing the Facebook if you want to reach out there. Okay, so Josh, quick question.
Sure.
You have 3 dream watches. And
Yeah.
Federico and I did a format that was taped and aired yesterday,
Sure.
where we highlighted ours. Mine, Reverso Repetition, Gerald Genta Arena by Retro Jump Hour, White Gold Tantalum, and Resonance Type 3. Okay, that said, we want you to have your say.
Okay, all right. So, yeah, you ran this by me, told me to think about this earlier today.
Yeah.
And thing about, for me, is every single day I fall in love with a new watch, right? So the way I thought about it is, what is something that's out of reach for me right now in terms of price point, right? So watches that are going to cost maybe near a car or more, right? That was my take on it. So even though I like Panerai, we talk about Panerai a lot, I have 2 Panerai right now, and for the most part, most of the Panerai, especially on the table, which are all really great watches, are all within my reach, so those are all off limits. Yeah. I started with one, which we've talked about before.
Yes.
It's a Patek 5711. The stainless steel with a blue dial, that is essentially a Grail watch. I will own that one day, and yeah, so that's number 1.
Okay.
Right? That's central. That's number 1. Number 2, I would say, would be a Vacheron Chrono.
Okay. Overseas?
The overseas Vacheron Chrono, rose gold on a bracelet. I've said many times that is the perfect watch, gold watch on a bracelet. It's ostentatious, it's flashy, but it has horological value. We're talking about the 2nd generation. I don't know if they made a rose gold in the 3rd generation now.
There's rose gold, but there's a look, there's a feel, there's a persona that is the 2nd generation overseas, especially with that silver dial, and I know that's your preference.
Yeah.
That the current just doesn't reprise.
Right.
I mean, it comes close, but it was a moment in time, it was a generation, they nailed it. That'll be remembered as their version of like the Porsche 993, the one they just got right.
Yeah, and I love it. I mean, that's a watch, you feel like a Russian billionaire walking around with that thing on your wrist.
By the way, descendant of Russian immigrants and a South Florida native, if you wonder how all these pieces come together.
That's right. So the 3rd one, which would be by a recent favorite manufacturer of mine, a brand that I've really fell in love with really this year, and we've talked about the quartz watch that they make that I was really in love with. So we're talking about a Centigraph, Vacheron Centigraph.
We're stepping up from the Elegant 48. We like that watch,
but that's attainable.
Yeah, we're talking about dream watches here. So Josh is enamored of rose gold, black dial, boutique.
The boutique,
Centigraph.
the Centigraph. It's unbelievable watch. So if I can only have 3 watches, and they're all watches that I essentially can't afford right now, those are the watches I have in my collection. I have a 5711 stainless steel blue dial. I have the rose gold Centigraph with the black boutique edition dial, and I have the rose gold Vacheron Overseas Chrono.
Yeah, and guys, we're going to be putting together a little bit of a channel where I'm going to do more featurey type stuff. It's going to be called Watch Talks, and it's going to live on our Watch You Want website. But we're going to have a little bit more bandwidth for you guys to actually send in your own videos of your dream watches. And also I'm going to do some more featurey type stuff. I love the 80s, I love the 90s, highlight watches from those periods, themed shows and shows with Josh and Federico, so keep an eye out for that. Okay, so more news from the week that was. We saw a interesting Omega, and this is an Omega Seamaster Planet Ocean, and this is the Pyeongchang limited edition. This is the 2nd of the 2018 Winter Olympics collection. Okay. Omega, I think they've timed like 28, 29 Olympics at this point.
Oh yeah.
Going back to like when my grandpa was a kid. But this one really works for me. 43.5 millimeters. Nice. Korean flag colors. Okay. 2018 pieces. Surprise. But just a really handsome watch with an attractive caseback, blue ceramic bezel combined with a rubber insert, polished blue ceramic dial, looks almost like enamel. Yeah. I mean, I'm a fan of this, and I feel like this is one of the better Olympic special editions. Like, I don't see this languishing like a lot of the past ones have. Yeah, well, I think in the past, a lot of times they were a little bit polarizing. Like, if you're a really big fan of that Olympics, then okay, great to watch. But if you're just a guy who liked that color scheme, it really didn't work for you. I think that this is definitely a watch that we're going to see people buying just because they like the look of it. Yeah, and I think it doesn't smash you over the head with its Olympic edition-ness. Like, I think this watch works on its own terms, and you don't really realize it's a Olympic edition until you turn it over. When you've got a chronograph that's got Olympic rings all over the registers and colors, and there's no way to avoid it. Hard to be a daily wear. Yeah, I mean, unless you were in Beijing in like 2008, you're like, yeah, I want to remember this forever. It's kind of polarizing. This is a lot better, I think. Holistically, it works as a special edition. It works as a standalone watch, and I think it's going to be well subscribed. And just to add to that, all the new Planet Oceans, like the deep black, all the different versions, I really like those watches. They're nice. They are really nice. And I think you get a lot of bang for your buck buying them pre-owned or like a little bit discounted even because the retail prices aren't insane on these things. No, $6,500 for this new Pyeongchang Special Edition, which I think, I mean, $6,500. It's got the new Maytas certified caliber 8900 in it, so it's the new Maytas chronometer. I really think it's pretty cool. I love it. I would like it even if it weren't a special edition. The colors just speak to me. Yeah. Also, I think it's important that we reach out and give some bandwidth to our live audience because we've got quite a few questions coming in. Okay, so we have a question coming in about Audemars Piguet perpetual calendars from the 1990s. I'd have to say, just in general, any Audemars Piguet perpetual calendar from the last 30 years is pretty much going to be an Audemars Piguet module driven by a Jaeger LeCoultre base caliber. So the question to ask yourself ultimately is, do you want to go with something that is a purebred, like a Patek Philippe, or are you comfortable with the long-standing relationship, and it dates back to the 19th century, between then LeCoultre, later Jaeger LeCoultre, and Audemars Piguet? In terms of durability, it's exactly what you would expect of a thin, fine movement driving a thin and fine complication. Not temperamental, but it requires upkeep. And I would say, just in general, if you're comfortable with the smaller size of 90s timepieces and that kind of movement, then there's really no faulting it.
Yeah. No, I mean, you can, in terms of like value, you're going to be getting them relatively cheap. So I'd say if you want a very well-made perpetual calendar at an extremely reasonable price, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Audemars Piguet, modern Audemars Piguet perpetual calendars pretty much start with the ultra-thin automatic in, I want to say, 1978. And from that point on, you're looking at fine, beautiful, exclusive watchmaking in the strictest tradition of Swiss horology, which is the only vertically integrated manufacturer is Switzerland. A little bit was contributed from many quarters. Ultimately, with the Audemars Piguet Imprimatur, you know the finish and the tuning is going to be perfect. So I endorse it. You just have to ask yourself, does it speak to your heart, and will you be happy with it?
Yeah.
Okay. This is a question from Yosemex that I think is important because it addresses the Sontograph. And he's asking, Tim, any comments about 1/100th of a second not actually being able to be measured on a 3 Hertz? That's 21,600 vibrations per hour in the Sontograph. I want to say it's like caliber 1506. And the idea is that you can measure down to 1/100th of a second, but the watch beats 6 times a second, or 3 Hertz. So how's that possible? Well, the best way to describe it, and Josh, for our friends, could you sort of describe how the hand moves, like the Foudroyant hand on the Sontograph?
It spins faster than I can see, essentially. Just goes crazy.
Yeah, it's a blur, and in theory, there are 100 individual detents, and it could stop at any of them. But because of the nature of the escapement, which is beating 6 times a second, I will say more often than not, it does land on the 6 same spots, but in theory, it can measure down to 100th of a second. That assumes reaction times that a human being, frankly, doesn't have, and a little bit of luck. It's an imperfect concept. If you really want to measure an interval that small, check out the 2017 Mont Blanc novelties from SIHH, or check out the Tag Heuer Microgerter. It's basically exactly that. A super high frequency chronograph built on a mechanical base. You're going to pay in either case, and a lot more than FP Journe prices. Okay, so moving on, we have an interesting new debut that I think is a little bit more, we like entry-level watches.
Oh yeah.
Like, we're not all about the grand complication.
We like grand complication, but
I do.
Yeah. But no, we like entry level. It's good, especially when there's a lot of times we talk about it, they have to reach.
Yeah.
So you get a little more value.
But tonight I want to show you what's possible below $7,000. So we're going to do some wrist checks here.
Cool.
Unfortunately, Josh is wearing a watch that I think costs a bit more than $7,000.
Yeah, a little bit more. Not double. But
how much? Josh is wearing a PAM 389. This is the A magnetic from 2013.
Ceramic bezel, titanium case.
What would the price on that be like?
I want to say it's around $9,000.
Okay, so that one's not quite a grand comp, but the watch that I'm wearing now is from my JLC collection. You guys are always getting on me for wearing watches that are like wrist cars, and I wanted to show a watch that's wonderful, exquisite, like those Audemars Piguet we just discussed. Thin, fine, and gorgeous, and traditionally sized, and attainable. This is my Jaeger LeCoultre Master Moon. This is a reference that was made in 37 millimeters in the late 90s to the early to mid 2000s. 2004 was the cutoff for this one, but it's a complete calendar, it's a moon phase, and it uses the old style JLC white discs with red print, used since the 1930s on calendar watches. You can see for the day of the week and the month. And this is a watch that just has so much power, so much charisma, and again, 6,000 or less. I think I paid 5,500 for this one. Superb, attainable, and a true heirloom watch. I mean, I probably won't have any kids, but my sister probably will. She's married, so they'll be getting this, and to me, Yeah.
Looks like a very nice stainless steel dress watch.
Yeah, it's a watch that I have worn around the world, and it's a watch that I have so many memories associated with it, and I feel like for most wrists that are not truly huge, this is a perfect size, and black with steel, it works with anything except a bathing suit.
Hard to believe that these are both called watches.
Yeah, I mean, on the other hand,
same species.
Yeah, this is like the aircraft carrier, and this is like the F-18.
Yeah.
And I can land one on the other.
That's right.
But in that vein of more attainable watches than like the usual Duomet and like Reverso Tourbillon, there was a new debut this week, Hamilton's Intramatic 68. Now this is a tribute to Hamilton's historic production, the old 1968 Chronograph B. Chronograph B was an inverse panda with black dial and silver registers. Chronograph A was a true panda. This is a watch that retails, Josh, for under $2,200.
Okay, cool.
I mean, what do you think about this 42 millimeters in stainless steel?
So I really haven't ever gotten too in-depth in Hamilton. I know that they are heavily traded like amongst private dealers or private sellers, so I haven't really gotten too in-depth with them, but I know that solid movements. I know that they really listen to their collectors big time. So they make things that people actually want to buy, and the price points are really, really good. So I'd say it's a sport watch, right? It's a chronograph. It's a vintage-looking sport watch, which both those things sing to me. I'd say it's probably a good watch. And at $2,200 retail list price, I mean, it's not going to go to zero. So in the value proposition, it seems like it's there too. Yeah, the dial of this one is really nicely rendered. It has a tachymetric scale. It kind of reeks of late 60s motorsports trackside chronograph charisma. And again, for $2,200, and can't really go wrong.
Yeah, and here's the thing: Hamilton does a good job of making watches that are attractive. I'm not a fan of all their watches, but many of them are very handsome, and they give you just enough technical interest that you don't feel like you're getting a simple recased base ETA.
Yeah.
This one has the H31, which is basically a 7750, but takes the power reserve from 42 hours up to 60.
Oh, that's nice. That's an added bonus right there. That's great. I mean, I know that Hamilton has a lot of different references, and so they're not really like known for just one watch. They just release a lot of things. So, I mean, if you like the watch, get it, and you know, if you're being a snob about it, then don't get it. But if not, I mean, it's a great like, I guess you call it a beater, you know?
Yeah.
Like a knockaround watch.
And, you know, nice watch, 100-meter water resistance. This is a watch with a little bit of technical interest. This is a watch in a good modern size with a historic look, and it harks back to the era that Hamilton likes to evoke. Bought by SSIH, which was a Swiss conglomerate that owned Omega and Tissot at the time in 1971. Everything before that is redolent of American history, and they like to trade on that American history. And I feel like the watches in their collection that are most successful are the watches that recall that era.
Yeah.
So they did a good job with this. 1,968 pieces. It is a limited edition. We've got a lot of those tonight.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I mean, even at roughly 2,000 pieces, like there's a lot of Omegas that well, there's like 15,000 piece, right?
Yeah, look at the Bond watches.
Right, yeah, 15,000 piece limited edition. So it truly is, in some regard, a limited edition.
Yeah, and on top of everything else, you have to remember that sometimes you buy a watch just because it has a ton of charm.
Yeah.
Not because it's high horology, not because it's super exclusive. 2,000 should be enough to satisfy the market.
Yeah.
You buy a watch because this is really a great case of a tribute that doesn't seem cloying or contrived. And it's the kind of timepiece you could wear to an office that's just swimming in Rolex, Breitling, and Omega, and everyone would do a double take.
Yeah. What? How large is the case?
42.
Okay, 42. Listen, I'm definitely interested.
Also, I think it's interesting that we've got a couple of questions coming in from longtime viewers. Okay, predictions on the Rolex BLNR, that's the black and blue GMT after Basel. I mean, Josh, we don't really see any GMT evolution on the horizon this year.
I mean, I know there was talk about possibly like a Coke bezel, stainless steel, which would be nice. I know that they've already made the red. It already exists. They already have the black, so it wouldn't be hard for them to make. I have not heard anything about them discontinuing, and I think maybe that's what he's alluding to. Discontinuing the Batman. I mean, the Batman's really, really strong. I think last year we saw a little dip in the resale market where they were selling a little bit under $8,000, and right now, like we can't we can't sell them less than $8,500. So they're really, really strong right now. And usually that means that distribution is being kind of controlled, which is good. So I don't see why they would stop selling that watch right now.
Everyone suspects we're going to see some Sea Dweller action this year. It is a fact that the 40mm Sea Dweller 40, the 116600, has been discontinued. That's confirmed.
Yeah.
So I think it's a given that we're going to see a Sea Dweller, and there is some rumor rumbling around that we may be seeing a Sea Dweller in the case size of the Explorer 2 42mm.
Yeah, that would be nice.
There's talk about a watch that's going to bridge the gap between the old Sea Dweller 40 and the Deep Sea.
You know what? That would make a lot of sense. I mean, I don't know if we've talked about it on the show before, but not a huge fan of the Deep Sea. It's a little too large on my wrist. The bracelet taper is a little bit too much, so that would be a great transition. One other thing that I know I've been talking about some of my collectors with, and we were talking about adding the Oyster Flex bracelet to other models.
Yes.
So I wonder if that would be one. They do a 42mm Sea Dweller with an Oyster Flex would be very interesting, I believe.
I think that would be hugely charismatic and successful, and I also think it would be a good opportunity to debut more sizes of the Oyster Flex. Or I believe originally with the ceramic rose gold Yachtmaster, there were 6 sizes, and a lot of people complained that they were
hard to match,
they were betwixt and between. They couldn't get that porridge that was just right. Folksy
they need to add,
aside.
Oh yeah, well, they need to add like some sort of micro adjustment, in my opinion. I wonder if they would do something like that.
I would say that something like the Glide Lock from the Submariner would be ideal.
Especially for a dive watch like the Sea Dweller. It makes sense.
It would make perfect sense, especially since the Sea Dwellers have even more deluxe versions of the Glide Lock and Flip Lock. So you put both of those features into a clasp, and I think you can get away with 6 sizes of Oyster Flex.
Without a doubt.
Okay, question coming from Peter K. Why don't you guys think Swiss watch companies in general offer financing options? Why don't they do this to help themselves out with their marketing? And I know I would go out and maybe adventure on a higher tier watch. Peter, I think the reason for that is that a lot of people who shop for these watches can put $25,000 to $50,000 on a credit card pretty easily. And when you can do that, there's no need to seek financing because you've basically got it in your wallet.
Yeah, I mean they allow like dealers to do that. So there's local dealers here that do that. Offer 5-year financing and things like that. And it just for them to do in-house financing, there's a huge amount of risk, especially with something. It's not a car, you can't repo it. It's not a house, you can't foreclose on it. You can literally stop paying for it, and now there's just a huge amount of risk. I feel like it would probably, if they did it on a large scale, it probably just cost too much money.
Yeah, I think when you're in good with your dealer, I think you can put a huge amount of money on a credit card in many cases, and that functions as a loan for most folks. Also, like Josh said, it's just difficult because dealers often wind up doing it solo. Do we still offer financing in-house?
We use a company called Firm. It's an outside financing company. They do tend to charge a little bit of a high rate on it, so it's really just for large amounts that you don't want to put on your credit card.
Yeah, it's
just
there,
an extra option.
It's there if you want it, but it's not necessarily to make a $2,000 watch more attainable. Honestly, if you have to seek approval on a $2,000 watch, I really feel like you should never finance fun. That's my personal mantra.
Yeah, makes sense.
I pay cash for the car, pay cash for the watch, and then you have no regrets at all.
You're a very disciplined man.
Yeah, well, I'm the guy who's talking about like a 5-year roadmap to collect watches. Federico's like, I got another watch yesterday.
Yeah, I think I might buy this by the end of the day. We'll see. Federico and I are very impulsive, whereas Tim is, he's already decided exactly which watches he will be purchasing for the rest of his life.
Yeah, exactly. I just have to live long enough to get them all.
Right.
So guys, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. We're not going anywhere, but I love the chat going on in the live chat box between our viewers and Federico. For those of you just joining us, Federico is chatting watches, talking watches in our live chat box. And also follow us on Instagram, where Federico is talking watches 24 hours a day. He's got a great feed going, and he's very interactive. That's where you can always reach him. He doesn't do live shows, but he's always live on social media. Okay, so question from Chris Rupert. Josh, he's asking, I'm trying to decide between a Cartier tank and a JLC Reverso for a go-to dress watch. He has a few stainless steel sports watches currently, so lay out the case, I guess, for the tank or the Reverso as you see it.
Well, for me personally, I would go for the Reverso. It's going to be from a much better movement house. It's going to have a little bit more provenance in regards to the brand you're going for. The Cartier tank, depending on which one you go for, is not a bad watch. It's going to probably be a little bit larger watch, maybe a little sportier, but if you already have the stainless steel sport watches and you're looking for a square watch with, you know, some presence to it, and maybe a talking piece or something that you can wear under a cuff, and you can also wear the JLC Reverso as a sports watch.
Yes.
My go-to, which we've talked about it before, Squadra. So
yes, this is where the Reverso becomes a sports watch,
That's
like
right.
you said. Yeah, you get more water resistance, you get automatic movements, you get complications, you get micro adjust bracelets with rubber wrapped links, even when they're gold.
Oh yeah.
Squadras are a great buy.
Yeah, and they're not super well respected by the market. So if you buy them pre-owned from guys like us or other, you know, reputable dealers, you're going to get an unbelievable deal.
Yeah, for something that was basically JLC's response to the likes of the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore and the Hublot Big Bang. I mean, the idea that you can get a Squadra world chronograph on a vulcanized, rubber-wrapped titanium bracelet with clasp, you can get that for less than a standard, like, steel ceramic Big Bang.
Yeah. Oh, way less.
If you're in the market for that kind of watch, automatic decision. But let me just clarify, Chris, if you're choosing between a Cartier tank and a JLC Reverso, I feel like you're choosing between a traditional Reverso, not a Squadra and a Cartier tank.
Yeah.
So let me lay out some of the options you have on both sides. It's important to remember that the popular rumor is that JLC's first design for the Reverso was given to Cartier, then an important movement customer of LeCoultre in the 1930s, and became the tank basculant. So check out the tank basculant before you buy a Reverso, because it has a lot of the same appeal and rotating case fascination factor. If you're looking for a way to waste time in meetings, it'll give you just as much satisfaction. Now, of course, the Reverso is going to offer you more options, complications, metals, case styles. Obviously, I think a Reverso Duo in the Grand Tie case, 42mm lug-to-lug, 2 time zones, is a modern classic, and very attainable for, I would say, even under $6,000 in steel.
And there's somewhat of a like a rise in popularity of the Reversos, say, in the last like 4 or 5 years. Yeah?
And I would also say, though, if you're looking to spend a little bit more money, if precious metal is on the agenda, consider something like the Cartier CP, a Collection Privée Cartier Paris that came out between 98 and 2008. It's what preceded Cartier fine watchmaking and succeeded the Louis Cartier collection as the watch nerd watches in the Cartier collection. But you can pick up some of the CP Cartier tanks, including the dual time, which is definitely worth your while. A bit more because they're precious metal, but worth your while because they're undervalued. You're talking about true JLC, Girard-Perregaux, Zenith levels of watchmaking in a Cartier package, so style and substance, consider both. Okay, so question from Nicholas663, Josh, Audemars Piguet, Royal Oak Offshore, stainless steel 41mm, or a Aquanaut from Paddock?
I mean, it's a hard question to answer. So the 15400 is going to be on a steel bracelet. I have seen a mod where somebody put it on a rubber strap, so now we're like talking a little bit closer. I mean, you're going to be paying roughly the same for each watch. One's going to hold a little bit more value, so the 5167 is probably going to hold a little bit more value. It's going to have, you're going to be a little bit above, like an upper echelon in movement and in name with the Paddock.
Yeah.
The 15400 is going to wear obviously much larger. I would say more comparable would be a 15300 and the Aquanaut in terms of size. It's such a hard. I would have to know what else is in your collection.
And I'm just going to specify that because the Aquanaut is a much more robustly water-resistant watch,
that's true.
They're not directly comparable. You're going to get 5 ATM on that Royal Oak, which is enough for maybe surface swimming per Audemars Piguet. I wouldn't take the chance, but AP says you're good to go. The screw-down crown makes it a little bit more credible. Just remember that the Aquanaut is a true no-holds-barred sports watch. Short of professional diving, it's got a lot more water resistance than the AP. Also remember that with the AP, you're paying a lot of money for a finely finished bracelet, for the integrated Gerald Genta design of the bracelet and the lugs and the case and the watch, whereas with the Aquanaut, the classical design is a rubber strap, and we're assuming that you're discussing an Aquanaut on a rubber strap the way it usually comes equipped versus a 15400 on a bracelet the way it usually comes equipped.
That's right. Yeah. The one thing I would add is that the fit and finish, it's so different. The Aquanaut, it's going to feel very, very light, very is small on the wrist.
Yeah.
Whereas the 15400 is going to be super robust, and it's, I mean, they're not really comparable watches, honestly.
I would say, quite frankly, when you look at something like a 5980, a Nautilus chronograph, I would say that the 15400 wears closer to that, because the interaction between bracelet and lugs and case really makes the 15400 sort of a bridge between the older 39mm cases in the Royal Oak family and the 42mm offshore, and I'd say it wears halfway between the two, closer to the offshore than the older Royal Oaks, and definitely closer than the ultra thin. But I will also throw this out. On a movement front, the Patek is going to have better finish, but technically the Audemars Piguet 3120 caliber is more advanced, more capable, and more rugged. So both nicely finished. The Patek gets the edge, but the Audemars has a longer power reserve and a more robust architecture.
I agree.
Okay, so we have a nice debut, and by nice, I mean stunning. Back to the world of Zenith, back to the world of special editions.
Sure.
We liked last year's El Primero Range Rovers.
We did a lot, yeah.
I did a great little summary in my Stepford corporate voice for the Govberg side of the family, if you want to check out the Govberg channel after the broadcast. But there's a new one, and it's one of the most masterfully coordinated rollouts of car and watch that I've ever seen, with the Geneva Motor Show seeing the debut of the new Land Rover Range Rover Velar. And Valine has both this El Primero and the Velar, so you can see both. And the Velar is a really handsome $60,000 to $90,000 truck.
Okay.
That's going to slot in between the Range Rover Evoque and the Range Rover Sport.
So it's like a mid-size.
It's a mid-size by the standards of Range Rovers.
Of course, okay.
I mean, Brian Govberg's got the Range Rover out back, and yeah, it's bigger than the Velar. So it's also important to note that this watch is a little bit more ornate than the original, not quite as bashful. This watch, the Velar, has a 42mm ceramized case, blackened, so aluminum frame for the Range Rovers, aluminum frame for the Zenith. It has a dial that is gray satin grained vertically, featuring copper accents on the sub-registers, on the printing, on the hands, on the indices, that really look like rose gold.
Oh, interesting.
So it's a handsome watch, it's a versatile watch, because 100-meter water resistance and an El Primero. Josh, what do you think of the idea of rolling out watches and cars at the same time as a marketing tactic?
I'd say so long as it's not Panerai and Ferrari, I think you're okay.
The unloved Panerai Ferrari series from 2005 to 2010. And if you're wondering why I've got a bunch of Panerai Ferrari models and assorted Panerai of all descriptions on the table, it's because I was filming an in-house instructional for our staff on Panerai case types and lingo. So that's what's going on there.
We're on the gamut here.
But yeah, we like the watch. We love what Zenith is doing with the Range Rover crossovers, because they don't hammer you over the head with the car content.
It just, yeah, they're nice wearable watches that even if you don't own the car, the watch makes sense, and if you own the car, then the watch definitely makes sense.
Yeah, and the pricing, I think, stays reasonable. Zenith has been focusing on value. $9,000 for the watch. A little bit high by the standards of recent Zenith releases, but at the same time, quite a bit more affordable and probably longer lived than the $60,000 to $90,000 truck.
That's certainly the case.
And those of you who have owned Land Rover products know exactly what I'm talking about.
More of a lease than a purchase, you'd say?
I would say more of a down payment on your future loss of an organ.
Understood.
I mean, you're going to have to give up a kidney to pay for those ASR stability control, traction control, ABS boost, warning lights down the road.
Oh, jeez, yeah.
I think Land Rovers were single-handedly responsible for CarMax raising the price of their extended warranties. So, okay. Josh, I want you to offer a little bit of insight, because we've got Panerai on the brain tonight.
Sure.
You're a Panerai owner. You're wearing a PAM 389 tonight. The story in the watch market over the last year for me has been Panerai's recovery as a brand, even while the market in general has sunk. What happened and what changed?
Well, so we'll start with, about 24 months ago, Panerai was as low as it could get. I mean, there were watches, say like, for example, the 292, which is a favorite of mine and probably on the horizon for me to own, as being offered by reputable dealers as low as $3,500. We were talking about this before, which is, I mean, it's a travesty, really. I mean, these watches were selling for less than their cost of manufacture as a pre-owned piece. So it was really, really in dire straits. So what they did was they did 2 price decreases at the retail level within the 12-month period, right? Which was obviously rough. It was tough for a lot of the dealers. It was tough for pre-owned dealers as well, because we had stock that all of a sudden became less valuable. Yeah. So it was rough, but it was something that needed to be done. They also started releasing new models, and the models that they released, unlike say like the Vacherons, they made a lot of sense. They were releasing new models with in-house movements and different colored dials and different case structures at the same or lower retail prices than their predecessors. So those two things really helped to solidify the market.
Okay.
They did lose a lot of their traditional collectors. I think they really did kind of, those guys are really staying away. So a lot of the really old special editions, the PAM 203s, 5218, 201s, 203s, things like that.
Your pre-Vendome stuff.
Pre-Vendome stuff really took a massive hit and kind of stayed down. But the market certainly has bounced. We call it a bounce, right? It didn't go back up to where it was, which I don't think it ever will. I think it was really an issue where the pricing, especially on the really special collector edition pieces, was just so astronomically high. It really didn't need to be that high. So those came down to a reasonable level. You're still paying, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 for some of these really special editions, as opposed to, 80, 90, 100 and above. But the lower level pieces, the attainable pieces, all made a nice bounce. Watches like this can now be had at about $5,000 to $6,000 as opposed to the $3,000 or $4,000 they were last year. And you have a lot of the 1950s case, the 1940s radio mirrors, in-house movements. This is
But we saw a lot of steel. We saw a lot of titanium. We saw a lot of refocusing on base metals. We saw Panerai get away from the giant rose gold complications. Stuff like that still exists, but Panerai realized it had gone too far up market too fast, and it was in a uniquely horrible market for that kind of watch.
Oh, without a doubt.
They righted their ship, though.
Yeah, well, they certainly have. They're making a lot of very wearable watches, so getting away, like you said, from like just the massive, rose gold, complicated, crazy pieces. They have lowered their retail prices, and they've released like things like the Due, which we've talked about, and I'm starting to warm up on the Due, actually.
Okay.
So I when I was up in Philadelphia, I got to try one on. I don't hate the watch. So that's progress, right?
Yes.
So they have some wearable pieces, again, somewhat affordable, and then you do see some of the pieces like the Blue Dial Boutique editions, the 690, going on the resale market at or above retail. That is a good sign. It's not a $30,000 watch going at or above retail. It's a $9,000 or $10,000 watch going above retail. So people aren't getting destroyed on the resale. So I'd say, they've done a really good job. They have controlled distribution a little bit better.
Yes.
They released their new models, and they are essentially where they should be.
So let's just summarize. Panerai managed to get in touch with what people were willing to spend on Panerai. There were a lot of models like the 632, 634, ETA calibers, simple spring bars, a little bit decontented by Panerai standards, but much more accessible. Refocusing on good design rather than complication and wowing people with precious metals. Steel in a blue dial has a ton of punch these days, and Panerai leveraged that. Also, important to note, Panerai's Due, a little bit heretical. Josh explained that they've alienated some of the traditional Paneristi, but that's not necessarily their market anymore. Those people who bought Panerai when they were a 5,000 watch a year brand are not going to drive sales in the era of 70,000 watches a year. So by adjusting prices, offering better models for the market and the audience they're reaching today, and I think also by kind of reining in supply, they were able to resurrect their brand. And there was a period when we were saying Panerai, the market's flooded, it's hopeless, and it'll be that way forever. They turned the ship around fast. Very
impressive. And then the putting some R&D to work with those Carbotech models,
showing they can still shoot for the moon.
And you know what? They're not super overpriced either. The 616 and the 661, both cool watches. I got to try on both of them. When I first heard of them, I thought, a forged carbon Panerai is maybe the dumbest thing I've ever heard. A solid in execution, completely turned around.
And you know why I think it works? Because it doesn't complicate or clutter the watch. That's what you really can't touch. That's like the third rail of Panerai design. White dials, excessive complication, changes to iconic dial architectures, just index and hands. Give me basics, give me minimal printing. give me a solid plane of dial without any kind of dog tooth jumping through, a power reserve. I don't necessarily want a GMT. I don't want a date window.
No.
They were able to really kind of rein in the complexity on those Carbotechs. Changing the material, that's kosher. They've been doing titanium since the pre-Vendôme days. So yeah, it worked. Now in terms of our clothes, I want to leave you guys with something spectacular. This is a brand we don't see too often, but again, I'm always promoting my Govberg channel. I do have a De Bethune review over there of a DB28 kind of blue. Now, just recently, Denis Flageolet and De Bethune have upped the ante with the De Bethune DB28 Tourbillon Meteorite kind of blue. What does all that mean? It means that for $250,000, you're getting floating lugs, you're getting a grade 5 titanium blue oxidized case, you're getting a big chunk of an Argentine meteor, itself quite scarce, that has been oxidized blue and then speckled with white gold celestial bodies. You're getting a 6-day power reserve. It's a high beat tourbillon, like an El Primero, but with a 6-day power reserve. Handmade, low volume. You're never gonna see this watch. But I'm happy to share some pictures, because that's probably as close as I'm gonna get.
Low volume means?
Low volume for the original DB28 kind of blue. The tourbillon was 5 pieces. The kind of blue that I reviewed on our Govberg channel was 10 pieces.
There's no volume is really what it is.
Yeah, basically. I often joke about selling a kidney. Who are you going to sell it to? Denis Flageolet is not going to take the trade. He's probably sold out of these things already. And with a movement that combines brass, that combines titanium, that combines stainless steel, you've got a spectacle on both sides. And I can't think of a better way to end the night than that watch. 42.6 millimeters blue titanium case. I can tell you from experience that case size with their floating lug design fits my 16-centimeter wrist. So Josh,
yes,
thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Tim.
Federico, Faylene, thank you for making this possible. You guys can follow Federico on our Instagram account. Be sure to check it out because he's always chatting watches over there. I'm Tim, he's Josh, she's Faylene, he's Federico, I've got a crowd, this is Watch You Want, and thanks for logging on.
See ya.